Hello, my name is Jack Ducard, and this is Sentinel Circle. Please, if you like what I'm doing here, like, subscribe, click on the bell for notifications for when I do it some more. And if you have any thoughts, opinions, good or bad, positive, negative, please put it in the comments. Or if you're afraid of having me read out your comment, put it in an email. You can remain anonymous. I promise you that. Like I said, doesn't matter, good or bad. You can literally say you hate my guts, and I will still read it on here with a smile on my face. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. Okay, so we're going to get right into this. It's a topic that I wanted to talk about. And let's remind myself what the topic is. Okay, so the topic is about voting. In a previous life, I ran for public office. I'm not going to talk about what position. I'm not going to talk about where. All I will say is it was a nonpartisan, local, city level position. The reason why I ran for this position is I graduated from college. And my ideas started before graduation. I was angry with what happened to me. To be frank, I'm still very angry at what happened to me. And I know people are going to say, let it go. It was years and years and years ago. The problem is with that is I still have nightmares about it. I have scars on my face from being attacked in jail. Scars that I wouldn't have otherwise if I had never been in a jail cell. I had to explain to many people why that happened. I had to explain my story, basically. And it happened, even though my record's expunged, I still had to explain within the past 2 years of why it happened, all that stuff. Every time I have to explain it, it opens those wounds. Okay? And I know people are going to be like, well, why did you have to explain it? I don't want to talk about that. It was for a federal document, and they say right on the document that even if the record was expunged, you still have to talk about it, you still have to bring it up. And the issue is by federal law, it fell under a domestic violence charge, therefore someone had to be notified because of that, even though it didn't happen for quite some time. And it was a very, very awkward conversation I had because of that. And that's why to this day, I'm still bitter and angry over it. God damn it! I'm going to pause. Okay. I'm so sorry about that. My smoke detector started chirping. I know everyone's going to say, well, go ahead and change the battery. It's not a battery system. It's hardwired into the house with the other smoke detectors. I've looked online. I think I'm just going to have to get the landlord out to deal with it. Anyways, so that's why I ran for public office. Like I said, I'm very bitter, and I wanted to do something about that. Therapy just was not working, and it destroyed my trust in therapy in general. They wanted to put me on medication and all that stuff and charge me an arm and a leg, and I was a college student. I didn't have the money. I said, no, I'm not doing that. I will find my own way. So, I ran, and there were two other people running in the position I was running, the incumbent and another individual. The incumbent had been in this position for 20 years. It's very hard to unseat an incumbent. Very hard. My plan was revolved around the hope that nobody else would run, because in the past nobody else did run, but this other person ran, and the reason why they ran was because they felt that the people of my city were getting a raw deal with taxes. Admirable. Admirable. And in hindsight, had I pushed hard on the whole, we'll cut your taxes in half thing, I probably would have won. He was saying that any time we need to raise your taxes, we'll put it up to public vote. And it's like, that's the whole point of representative government, sir, is so that way you don't have to put it up for a vote every single time. Now, the position was not paid, and typically your public officials in positions like that are not paid at all. It depends on the position and what the charter says and all that other stuff. Like, county officials usually are paid, but that's because they are working, like, that's their full-time job. But in a position that I was running for, it was essentially you show up to a couple meetings, that was it. If you have to travel, you get paid for that. But beyond that, you don't get paid. Which is fine. I didn't want to be paid. And my platform was basically what I'm doing now, which is, this happened to me. I don't want it to happen to you. That was my biggest mistake. Was I believe that people have an understanding deeper than surface level. And after my election, I realized that no, people have a surface level understanding of things. The most common thing that I was asked as a nonpartisan position, and I've talked about this before, but I'll reiterate it. This happened during 2016. Who was running in 2016? I'm not going to name the name, but we all know by the color of his skin. And I'm talking orange, even though that's just coloring of the camera. They make it look worse than it actually is. I've actually met the man in person. He's not that bad. Anyways, what I mean by that bad is the color's not that bad. Anyways, so what people would ask me running in a nonpartisan position is, who is my party and who am I voting for? Or what am I going to do with taxes? Actually, that only was asked once. So yeah, it was who am I voting for and what my party was, and there was a nonpartisan position. So I had to deal with that quite a bit, and I was threading the needle. I should have had more conviction in stating loudly and proudly who I was voting for, but at the time, I wanted to stick to the issues in the city, the issues that mattered to me. That was, again, my mistake. And if you're planning on running for public office, I would encourage it. Believe it or not, I would actually encourage you to run just so you can understand what I'm talking about. Anyways, so the way the city charter worked is I had to get 10 signatures, and I was surprised how hard it was to get 10 signatures just to get on the ballot. And granted, I had people I know sign, but I didn't know 10 people in town. So I went door to door, and the amount of people that said, well, I don't know who you are, so I'm not going to sign that, was staggering. What does it matter? It's just a petition. Just sign it. Sign the damn petition. But Jesus, just 10 signatures. Granted, I got it done, but it actually took me 3 days to get it done. So submitted it. It was approved, and I was allowed to campaign, and I campaigned. The thought that I had, which was unique, at least in my view, was I would do Chinese takeout hangers, and that would be my campaign flyer, right? And I printed a bunch of them, and I went door to door, and a lot of people were not really willing to talk to me because, again, there was like, oh, I don't know who you are. Okay, well, this is your chance to know who I am. Door-to-door campaigning is probably one of the hardest things you'll ever do for anybody. It's not easy because you deal with people who, again, have no idea what is going on. And it's usually... I don't mean to bring up a stereotype, but it's usually people who wear flannel and cap and have that country boy look. It's always those guys. I don't understand it. And if you're like that, I apologize. It's obvious that if you're watching me, you have a deeper understanding of certain things, and I applaud you for that. Don't be surface level. Learn. Get out there. Understand the world for what it really is. Because a lot of times you only get surface level. You don't go any deeper than that. Anyways, but over the course of my campaign, I learned quite a bit. And what I learned is, even though I feel I know how the world works, not only do a lot of people don't, but they don't care to. They care only as far as it applies to them. And that's usually with taxes. Which, don't get me wrong, if you're a libertarian, you feel all taxation and stuff, great. I'm more pragmatic, and I'm not going to get into the whole tax debate, but I believe in certain taxes because they provide things like, roads and things like that. And if you weren't being taxed, you'd have to pay for it a specific way, because the people who build the roads have to be paid. The equipment has to be bought. The supplies has to be bought, right? So you either got two choices. You either pay taxes or you pay a toll. And have you driven on a toll road before? I rest my case. Anyways, point being is what I learned in that situation is I think until some people have to learn that the stove is hot. They have to touch it to learn that the stove is hot. They have to burn themselves. And it's sad. It really is sad that people have to do it like that. But, they I guess that's how they learn best or whatever, because, I'm going through a pro-police town, and this was during the whole thin blue line thing, obviously. And people were putting blue lights out there, and I'm saying, hey, so your local police department is corrupt. How do you feel about that? And yeah, that didn't go over well. I was in the news, and the news raked me over the coals, even though they were the ones that exposed that story. My story. They were the ones that exposed the corrupt cop, and they raked me over the coals. And I constantly refer to Rush Limbaugh's drive-by media statement, and it's true. They are the drive-by media. So the point that I'm trying to get here is you can't vote your way out of this. You simply can't. And the reason why you can't is because you have to deal with these other people. That's the simple truth. So I know what everyone's going to say. Well, we got the 47th president because we did vote, and that's great. That's great. Or if you think that that's the worst thing in the world, well, okay. We're all entitled to our own opinions. But it doesn't matter left, right, center, whatever, okay? The problem is a lot of people don't understand how our voting system is designed inherently. A lot of people don't understand that a general election is actually a strategic vote. You just vote for the candidate who you agree with most closely. And a lot of people are like, well, I vote for this person, but I'm holding my nose while I do it. Okay, well, that's fine. You also have the right to, do a write-in candidate, usually. Not every place has that. You also have the right to not vote. But just so you know, if you don't vote, that is a vote for whoever you don't want to win. You're not really voting for someone, you're voting against. And that's, again, the inherent problem with how our vote system is designed. Good or bad. Okay. The other issue is obviously participation. There's some people that think that like low participation immediately should disqualify people. Well, half the time, a lot of people don't even know an election's happening. I mean, general election in November. Yeah, we all know what that is. That's first Tuesday after the first Monday. But if your municipality is having a special election or whatever, a lot of times people don't know that. So that's what I'm saying is, like, you can't vote your way out of whatever this is. You simply cannot. And I don't know. I don't want to sit there and say it's by design. I don't believe it's by design. It's more. I personally, going through the experiences that I went through, it's when I say that you can't vote your way out of it, it's because of the other people. That's the simple truth. You may think that you're onto something. You may think that you're fighting for a cause or whatever. Okay. But when you're dealing with people that, and let's be honest, the people that we're talking about, we can call them Walmart shoppers, we can call them, mouth breathers, whatever term you want to use, I don't care. They vote differently. They may vote for the same candidate, they may vote for the same whatever, but they vote differently. And what I've noticed is, there's plenty of people like us out there, but they're spread out. So obviously, trying to get all those people together so that way they can have a voting block would be important, but is that going to happen also? Probably not. So then the natural question becomes, well, how do we get ourselves out of this? Whatever this is, be it the whole red pill thing or whatever. I'm of the opinion that you collectively can't get out of it. What you can do is mitigate. Okay? Raymond's channel, Raymond Thoughts and Minds, thinks that services are going to just start failing, which I've agreed with that. And I've thought that was going to be the case for years before I even listened to his channel. He's the first person to really, in my view, talk about it. At least from me hearing it. And then, of course, he introduced me to Aaron Clary, which Aaron also talks about it. Better Bachelor doesn't really talk about it. Bo doesn't really talk about that. And ever since I started listening and subscribing to those channels, I'm hearing other channels talk about that kind of stuff. Now, that being stated, that's why I feel that being an individual is not the real way to go. I think that having a group is the way to go because, everyone's talking about, well, let's just homestead. Well, the problem is in order to homestead effectively, you have to have other things. You can't produce all that stuff. But if you have a group of individuals together somewhere, you can do that. And that's where Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged really talks about. They have all those people in John Galt's Gulch or whatever it was called. And that's what they did. They just said screw it, and they created their own community. Let the other people, I think Ayn Rand calls them the parasites, have at it. And I think that's kind of where people like Raymond's thoughts and minds are kind of pointing, as Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, which I think it's going to be along those lines. I mean, it's possible things are just going to get worse like that. It's going to be a slow failure. I'm going to be honest with you. I have an exit strategy. I don't want to own a home. I don't want to do any of that stuff. It's more, if I can't get this community started, or whatever you want to call it, I'll put the link of the video that I did in the description, or I'll probably make it like a pinned comment so that way you guys can see it. That group, I feel, is where we should go. And the reason why I say that is because it will allow us to survive. You know, being a homesteader, well, if what Raymond's thinking is correct, and I'm saying if, even though I do agree with him, I'm saying if for a very specific reason, then it goes to what Aaron Clarey's saying, which is we're going to become a failed state. And he thinks, Aaron Clarey thinks, that the closest example of what we're going to become is South Africa. And we know what's going on in South Africa with the Boers. I do firmly believe there's going to be roving bands out there. In fact, there is a news story that happened a couple of years ago. It was in the San Francisco Bay Area where this couple was driving and they got carjacked in the middle of the day in public. You know, like the car just came and swerved in front of them and tried to carjack them. And the only place where I've seen that happen is that famous video of the two armored car drivers. The one dude happened to be a SWAT police officer. They're driving the car and they get ambushed. And we saw with COVID that ambulances were getting raided for medical supplies. So homesteading out in the middle of nowhere, and I understand, like, you know, people are saying, well, I got self-protection and all that stuff. If it's a group that you're going up against, you're not going to last long. That's just the simple truth. You know, I mean, I'm not an expert in combat. I'm not an expert in self-defense. But I understand numbers. And usually the group with the numbers wins. Now, granted, as a defender, you'll have an inherent advantage, but it becomes force multiplication. And if the force multiplier exceeds the defense ability of just yourself, you're going to lose. And then what is it all for? You know, and if what Raymond's saying is true, that power is going to start going out, all that stuff's going to start happening, well, again, you're going to have more problems than you realize. You know, at least with a group, you could have like a generator and you could have guards standing at the gate and all this other stuff. Okay? I'm not saying that you should become, you know, like some weird cult or something like that, but you should understand that being by yourself in a situation like that where we become a failed state, if that's where it goes, and again, I'm saying if, even though I agree, that's not good. You know, and my preparation is I'm going to do as what I can to survive, and if push comes to shove, I have already made peace with the fact that I will finish on my terms. You know, I've made peace with it. I've made my peace with God. You know, when I was in my jail cell, I had divine intervention, and that's when I made my peace with God. And I'm not telling anyone how to live. I'm not telling you to be scared. I mean, I really hope I'm wrong. I really hope Ray's wrong. I really hope Aaron's wrong and all these other guys are wrong. I really hope that. But with how things are going right now, it's going to be true. Okay? So that's what I'm saying is you can't vote your way out of this, because even if you voted today, it's still going to take years to implement. Okay? And even then, it's going to be too late. You know, because unfortunately, the people that we elect currently their timeline is dependent on their position, be it 2 years, 4 years, 6 years. That's it. They're only thinking about the next election. Okay? And they got theirs, and they're going to forget about you. Okay? And I find it funny how, I shouldn't say I find it funny, but I fully understand why people hate Congress, but they like their congressman. And that's the inherent issue. Everyone's like, well, how does this person stay elected in Congress when, you know, they're doing this? Well, there's a reason for it. They either have a built-in advantage, they're the incumbent, or their district votes for that party regardless. You know, so what are you going to do? You're going to move to that district and primary that person? Well, good luck. You know, so all I'm saying is what are people expecting at this point? You know, I know everyone's like, well, you know, we came this close to losing democracy, or we've lost democracy, or whatever. Okay, well, what's the next election going to look like? You know, I mean, I would think that you know, 2024 showed a lot of people that just because they lose one time doesn't mean they're out of the game. You know, and honestly, like, if you're on the D side, you really should have just let Trump finish out, and then he would have been, you know, just bogged down during COVID. But you guys didn't do that. You know, now look at where you're at right now. Like, if anything, I think that just, you know, it made things infinitely worse for you guys. You know, and if you're on the R side, well, I gotta say that there's been some things that has happened that really shook faith. You know, specifically the whole Epstein thing. You know, and that's the other point too, is nobody's gone to jail yet. Nobody's been arrested. Nobody's been frog marched anywhere. You know, and I don't know if, I mean, granted, I sound conservative. I do root for that side because I do align with most of that stuff. But I'm not as conservative as I used to be. I'm not as libertarian as I used to be. I'm not as socialist as I used to be. I think they all suck. You know, I have read Marx. I have read Lenin. I have read Mao. Okay? They suck. I've read other provocateurs, like John Locke, all that stuff. And there are ideas. You know, everybody's got good ideas, but they all have horrible ideas as well. You know, and that's okay. It's okay to read those things. It's okay to understand. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. You know, read the Communist Manifesto. Read My Struggle in German. Read those things. Learn, understand, because you got to understand something. If you don't care about elections and all that, that's great. But it still affects you, whether you like it or not. your life is impacted daily. You know, I mean, like, people were like, well, how does it impact me? Well, TSA. If you don't fly, great, but I fly. You know, and I remember a time where you could just walk up to the plane and board it. You know, I was young, but I remember it. And now, you know, you get your areas touched by, you know, some big burly man. That's politics acting on you. You know, being taxed at 40% is politics acting on you, whether you like it or not. When you go and you pay for whatever and you have to pay sales tax, that's politics acting on you. So you can sit there and say, I don't understand it, I don't, whatever. But understand one thing out of this is politics is acting upon you at all times, day in, day out, from birth to the end. And you may not like it one bit, that doesn't matter. The reality of the situation is you're still here. It's still being inflicted upon you whether you like it or not. Be realistic, my friends. Be understanding and realistic. You know, and I would hope that the whole US aid thing woke you up. That's your money being spent on that stuff. And when I worked in certain fields, I saw that kind of spending. I saw it. I physically saw it. You know, and we have movies made about it. Like one that sticks out to my mind is War Dogs. You know, and if you watch, what is it, American Greed? It's there all the time. There was this one, these two sisters. They owned a hardware store and they made millions defrauding the government. That's your money they were stealing to go on vacation, to have bigger houses than what you could ever dream of, to have nice cars, and they owned a little hardware store out in the middle, God knows where. That's your money that they took. You know, and granted, like, you know, they did get caught, but the PPP loans, same deal. That's your money that was taken and defrauded. Okay? And it should upset you every single time. But I understand, we're all numb to it. We've seen it countless times at this point, and no one goes to jail. No one gets arrested. You know, and everyone's reaction is, if you don't like it, we'll go run for office. And I'm telling you, go ahead. Waste your time, waste your money, waste your energy. You'll probably not win. You'll learn something, though. You'll learn a heck of a lot, like I did. I didn't win, but I learned quite a bit. And that's what I'm trying to tell you, is you can't vote your way out of this. You simply can't. You know, you may go in there, you may have the most pure of intentions, you know, but, you know, your life is going to be scrutinized to an uncomfortable degree. You're not going to be able to do certain things because one misstep and you're out of the race. You know, it's going to be plastered all over the news. And even if you're like the most pure at heart, someone out there is going to think that you're the biggest piece of dirt, and they're going to say, well, all politicians are like this, even though you're not a politician. You're just some guy. You know, you're their neighbor, you're their friends, you live down the street, you go to the same bars, you go to the same restaurants, whatever. You know, because again, they have surface level understanding. You know, you go to a city council meeting, those people are elected from your neighborhoods. They're your neighbors. You know, but again, they're all corrupt and evil and blah, 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 blah. You know. So I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, well, okay, what's the answer? And I already told you what the answer is. I am trying to build a community where men can retreat to. You know, because I believe that we need it. And I know we need it because when I went through my issues, I needed a place to go, to run to. And it wasn't there for me. You know, the places that did exist, they wanted $10,000 up front. You know, and I needed a place to run, but it wasn't there. My choice was, if I was to run, I would be homeless, and I couldn't do that. I know this was a little on the darker side, but it's hard. It really is hard. I'm gonna open up a little bit here for my final thoughts. I struggle every day. And I know I talked about this earlier in the video, but I struggle every day. There are nights where I can't sleep because the moment I close my eyes, I'm back in that jail cell. And it wasn't like a true jail cell. I was low security, so I was in a dorm, but I'm there. I can smell it. I can taste it. You know, I can taste the nasty food. I can smell the stink of BO and other fluids. That big window where the guards can look at you at any time. I didn't want that to happen to anybody else. I mean, if you break the law, okay, face the consequences. But like I said, I didn't break the law. You know, and if I did, I wouldn't be here. You know, if they could prove it, if they could prove that I broke the law, I wouldn't be here. But here I am. You know, and one day I'll show you the giant box of all the paperwork I have. And I know there's people that think that my ideas are on the crazier side, and that's fine. That's fine. I'm going to keep trying. Because the simple truth is if I don't try, what else do I have? You know, and I don't want to go quietly into the night. That's just not my nature. I want to go out with strength and conviction. Because that's who I am. That's how I was brought up. And that's what I believe in. You know, when I ran for office, it was the scariest thing I've ever done. That I intentionally did it to myself. You know, someone leaked to the press my criminal record. And that's how the story on me got put into the news. Nobody cared until that came out. And then all the news agencies wanted to comment. And I honestly thought I was going to lose my job because my record was expunged. And I told my job that I didn't have a criminal record. You know, my boss later on came up to me and said, you know, you passed the background checks. That's all I cared about. But, you know, that was the best job I had up until where I'm working at now. You know, but I was ready to lose it all if I had to. I was ready. I knew that by running, I was putting a target on my back. Fortunately, the police did not harass me. I think they realized that that would put a target on their backs too. But I know, and it's funny. Well, I shouldn't say funny as in haha funny, but it's ironic. After I ran for office and I lost, a former coworker ended up unaliving her husband. And the same department was involved in that criminal investigation. And my father was brought in for questioning because he was the first person to show up to the scene. And she's upstate now. She's serving life in prison for the unaliving. She basically put a hole in the back of the guy's, her husband's head, because they were involved in a nasty divorce and she didn't want to lose the house. And the officers in the interrogation, they mentioned it. They mentioned my campaign. And my father, he wasn't scared per se. It was a cordial conversation. But he did state that, that I ran for these reasons, and the department is aware of the cop in question, and they felt lied to just as everybody else felt lied to in that situation. Because the cop was going around saying that my ex was his daughter, adopted daughter, and they all bought it hook, line, and sinker. And then, they got caught and they felt betrayed. They felt disgusted with themselves. But back to my original point. I know that people are going to say things about it. I'm used to it. And I don't care. I don't care what people say about me because they didn't live the life I lived. And I know people are probably thinking to themselves when they watch my videos that I'm lying about my life or I'm faking or whatever. And that's fine. Maybe I'll post a picture with all the paperwork or whatever. But like I said, I'm not doing this for them. I'm doing this for you, the person who does believe wholeheartedly in what I'm trying to achieve here. Because I know that there's a demand out there for this. I am the demand. It's a place that I would want to go. And like I said, I had this dream for years. Thinking to myself, God, what kind of person would I be if I had like that kind of support? I know that you could have probably lived in a hostel or whatever, but no. I think you need to be around like-minded individuals. No strings attached, like-minded individuals. I do believe in that fully. And I know there are certain people that I've even talked to in person and online that disagree with it. That's fine. We can all agree, disagree, whatever, and still like each other, still talk to each other. You don't have to get into a disagreement and hate them. Like, come on, that's childish. Debate is inherently disagreeing, but coming to a conclusion. Anyways, so back to the original point of this video is I don't want you to give up hope, but just understand that there's going to be people that sit there and say, well, get out and vote. And I'm telling you, yes, vote, but don't be surprised. And know that there is a different way. You don't have to continue this path. You can move on. You can do other things. Okay? Anyways, I appreciate you being here. Thank you for listening to me ramble. My name is Jack Descartes. This is Sentinel Circle, men watching out for others. If you liked this content, please like, subscribe, click the bell to get notifications when I do my drop. Comment. I read them all, good and bad. And I promise you'll be on here. We'll post your comment under me and we'll talk about it. If that makes you uncomfortable, email me. You'll remain anonymous. I'll just read it. And, you're always welcome here. Always. Doesn't matter who you are, your age, your race, any of that. If you are a man, you are welcome here. If you are a woman, you are also welcome here, but understand that this place is meant for men as a way to open up, express themselves in a judgment-free environment. And that's why I'm putting myself out there every single day. It scares me to death. I worry that my life is going to be severely impacted by this, but I believe in it wholeheartedly. I want to build this community as a force for good, because we need some good in our lives. I need some good in my life. I needed it for years, and I got to be honest with you, my life has changed by doing this in a very positive way. Anyways, have a good night or a good day, whatever. It's night here. But have a good day, and I appreciate it. Bye.